test, test, test. Good evening, everyone. This is an amazing crowd. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Can you hear me okay in the back? Okay, perfect. I'm Denise Fanning. I am the Arts and Exhibitions Coordinator here in Park Library. And thank you all so much for braving this rainy February dreary evening to be here tonight. Just a couple of quick notes of business. There is a reception in the Baby Room Gallery following this talk, so please head down to the Baby Room after this talk and you can meet the artist and enjoy some snacks. There's lots of good treats down there. And one more exciting piece of news, or at least it's really exciting for me, is that the Baby Room Gallery finally has its very own social media. So, so if you'd like, you can pull out your phones now and turn off the ringer, and then you can add the Baby Room Gallery. It's on Instagram. We are Baby Room Gallery _CMU _libraries. But once you type in Baby Room Galleries, it's the first thing that pops up. Or should be. And on Facebook, we're the Baby Room Gallery and Art Exhibitions at CMU Libraries. But there are QR codes by the pedestal in the gallery if you want an easy access to joining those pages. So follow those for future news and events and related stories related to our exhibitions. All right, so what else was I going to say? There was one other thing, but I'll come back to it in the end. So with that, thank you all for being here tonight, and also thank you to CMU Libraries for hosting this artist talk and exhibition. I always find it really important to emphasize how grateful I am that in this time of waning resources and budget cuts for universities nationwide, that CMU Libraries continues to prioritize the presence of art in the library and continues to support this wonderful mission to share the work and voices of active professional working artists. We've never needed the voices and vision of creatives more than we do right now. Thinker Edward de Bono says, "There is no doubt that creativity is the most important human resource of all. Without creativity, there would be no progress, and we would be forever repeating the same patterns." So I'm especially grateful to all of you for valuing this opportunity enough to take your time to come and be with us here tonight and to soak up the wisdom and the unique vision and experiences of our artist, Danielle Eliska. And because that's exactly what Danielle's work sets out to do, to break patterns. Danielle's work inspires deep consideration and asks questions of the past, the present, the future, and most importantly, the viewer. Danielle's powerful and important work explores the evidence left behind of a harrowing past and asks us to gaze deeply into the eyes of now. Her work takes us to the edges of time and space and asks us to consider the untold stories of the Black gaze hidden behind white narratives. And most of all, it celebrates the Black lives that are lighting up today while honoring the threads of the past and the lineage that led us here and leads us forward. Danielle Eliska is an award-winning writer, filmmaker, director, photographer, entrepreneur, and educator from Detroit. She's a co-creator of an experimental art community, A Love Letter to Detroit, which hopefully she'll share a little bit with us about tonight. Danielle received her MFA in dramatic writing and film from New York University and has gained notable screenwriting and photography recognition. Danielle was one of the inaugural grant recipients of the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment and New York Foundation for the Arts Made in New York Women's Fund in Film for her short narrative film, Shield. She was a 2022 Women House Detroit resident, a 2022 Sesame Street Workshop Writers Room Fellow, and is a recipient of the 2023 Culture Source Flourish Fund Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts Grant. Danielle has been a complete delight to work with. It was an absolute honor to get to gaze deeply into the eyes of each and every one of her subjects as I hung her work. If you haven't yet, please take the time to go experience her stunning work in the Baby Room Gallery after this talk. Please join me in giving our guest artist a warm welcome. I give you Danielle Eliska.
Hey y'all, so I'm going to talk to you guys how I talk to my students. I see so many students out here. I teach at CCS, so this should be easy, right? But it's always nerve-wracking when you have more people in the room and in the space. But I just want to say, before I get started, I just always honor God and my ancestors because I'm able to hold space because they held space before me. And I just want to thank so much. Denise, you are incredible. I want to thank CMU and everyone here who supported the arts and support the work that we're doing, and also just to be able to have space to show more work and to explore our work in different ways. I think that's a big thing with artists, is that we are always evolving and we want to speak to the times, right, with the work that we're doing. So without further ado, let me just get right into it. So the name of my exhibition here is called Capitalize the Being Black, and the reason why I wanted to do this work was I was doing research before I took a class at Penumbra Foundation, and Penumbra Foundation is an incredible photography foundation in New York specifically, and they tap into tintype, daguerreotype, so you get to learn that whole process. And for me, I'm a process girl, so give me digital is cool, but 35 millimeter all day, right? So now for me, and hey y'all, can y'all see me? Because I'm you probably can see the top of my head. I should probably step over here. But for me, I love 35 millimeter, but I always wanted to learn the tintype process. So being able to go to Penumbra Foundation and learn under some incredible people, Sam Dole, Joffrey Berliner, and many other people, it really just enhanced my process. But before I decided to do the tintype class, first of all, it was a gift from my husband. At that time, he was my boyfriend, but he hooked it up, right? He's out here. But I study. I love studying. It's one of my passions is research. So if you see any of my films, because my focus has always been filmmaking, screenwriting is my thing, I always take a historical contextualization of something, and I always use it as the backdrop of my work, and then I, create my story on top of that. So if you ever see any of my films, features, whatever, narratives, it will be this historical storyline that's this lull underneath the work that I create. So again, like I said, I love researching, so I do that same thing even in my photography practice. And what I started doing was just looking up all the tintype photos I can find. And for me, I'm going to just let you know, I love black people. It's Black History Month, so we're going to black it up in here. So everything that I do is always focused around black culture, the black diaspora. It's my passion. It's what I want to research, is what I want to highlight, because especially as a filmmaker who's been exposed to Hollywood, who's worked on Hollywood shows and sets, one thing I can say that's lacking is diversity. One thing, you might see different stories, but I think what Patty Jenkins said, actually last week I was in a meeting with Patty Jenkins, and she actually said, and if you don't know who Patty Jenkins is, she did Wonder Woman, okay? So she said that there are diverse people in Hollywood, but not diverse stories, right? So we really have to kind of tap in. So with that said, let me just get back to why I'm doing Capitalize the Being Black. I started looking at all the tintypes, and majority of the tintypes are of white families, white people, and black people are blurred out in the background. So we're going to just kind of dive in, and I'm going to walk you through what I put together specifically for this, and I want you to sit with it because it's just so important for you to kind of see. And then after we kind of wrap through these images that I'll show you, I'll kind of tell you a story of how I got here with this. So, postmortem child with African-American nanny, circa 1850s, 60s. Sit with it. Look at this. Now, this baby is passed away, unfortunately, but look at the position of this black woman. Daguerreotype of Georgina Holmes and her nurse, circa 1840s, 50s. Black nanny with white child, circa 1840s, 50s. Babies caring for babies. right? So when I was pulling these images off the internet, these are the taglines that were with each of the images, right? So tell me if you know the name of any of these women as of right now. I don't know any of their names, or these young people. Jeremiah Gurney, woman with child, a daguerreotype with applied color it's supposed to be from the 1850s. Hidden Black Nanny, circa 1860. A young girl with a Black American slave child at her feet, 1840s, 1850s. Young child and enslaved boy. Mammy and white women. Y'all uncomfortable yet? Because I want to make you uncomfortable with what you're seeing, because you need to be uncomfortable. This is not something that should feel good. African American woman holding a white child. Blurred Black child with a white child. Now again, these people aren't, like these Black people, these Black children, women and men are not, family relatives. These are enslaved people. Let me just state that. So it's not like, oh, this is their best friend that came from down the block. Joe Smith, an African American attendant, which should probably be enslaved man, Jason. African American slave nanny with master children, 1/6 plate daguerreotype D799. Enslaved man with white child. Daguerreotype of an African American slave with her arm wrapped around the younger of two siblings, circa 1850. Enslaved woman and white child. A young Black girl and her enslaver. An 1868 portrait of a little Black nanny. This is a little child, and she's caring for another child. How absurd is that? A very young house slave, a mere child, holding the master's child. An enslaved wet nurse, feeding a white baby. I added that part, but clearly you can see that. So let me just go back here, because for her to lactate, she probably had her own children, right? But look who she's feeding. What about her children? Enslaved elder with white baby. House slave plays with her master's child, late 19th century Brazil. I don't think she's having fun. What do you think? The oppression. So again, you've probably seen so many images of mostly women in these images holding these babies. So they're considered, you saw mammy and nanny. The mammy image also serves as a symbolic function in maintaining gender oppression. The mammy images is one of an asexual woman, a surrogate mother in blackface devoted to the development of a white family. That's from Patricia Hill Collins' Black Feminist Thought. If you have not read that book, I suggest you put it on your Amazon list or wherever you get your books. It's profound. And the myth of the faithful slave lingers because so many white Americans have wished to live in a world in which African Americans are not angry over past and present injustices, a world in which white people were and are not complicit, in which the injustices themselves of slavery, Jim Crow, and the ongoing structural racism seem not to exist at all. The narrative of the faithful slave is deeply rooted in the American racial imagination. It is a story of our national past and our political future that blurs the lines between myth and memory, guilt and justice, stereotype and individuality, commodity and humanity. And this is from the book called Clinging to Mammy, The Faithful Slave in the 20th Century America. Is this the back of a faithful slave? Albert Southworth and Josiah Hawes, a family portrait of a grandfather with their grandchild. And look at the position of this Black woman. When I saw her, I thought she was so powerful because I'm like, sis, it's 1850 and you sitting up there like, I do not want to stand here. I don't know what kind of trouble she may have gotten into after this portrait was taken. But you know, when you sit for a tintype or daguerreotype, it's not like digital. You can't go on your camera and erase it. This is like a whole plate that you have to to develop, like process before you even do the, you know what I mean? You have to code it and da. So for her to be standing like this and hold that pose, I thought it was one of the most powerful things that I could see. And she's looking directly at the camera, but if you remember the other images that we saw, most of them were looking away or they were blurred. Again, they can't look directly into the camera because we were told that we can't look directly at white people. You know, it was a time, especially in the South, where you had to step off the curb if a white person was passing by you, right? So these are like factual information. Like, you couldn't look a white person in the eyes. There are so many men who have been murdered in history because they looked at a white woman, or a black woman who's been murdered in history because she looked at a white man. So it's just thinking about those situations and also how they're present in these images. So when I was researching tintype photos, because I wanted to see my people, and I'm like, when I take tintype photos, I know who I'm taking tintype photos of. So I started looking at history, and I'm like, my people are the background of the white master's foreground, and I'm uncomfortable, I'm upset. So what I ended up doing was I took these images and I put them in my stories on Instagram. And within the hour, I had like 15 messages. And people were like, at first I was okay with the first 2. But you kept posting them. And I kept looking, and I couldn't look away. I was uncomfortable. I was angry. And I could not look away. And that's when I knew I had to do something more with the tintype work that I wanted to do. So again, we're talking about the black mammy here. Again, this is from an article, Confederate Veteran. But it talks about how the old black mammy does not now exist in the flesh and only in memory of those who knew her as she was, right? That's what I highlighted at the bottom. But I'm going to tell you right now, I lived in New York for 8 years. And I'm going to tell you that the nanny mammy image is incredibly real. In Brooklyn, on the Upper East Side, on the Upper West Side. And I'm going to tell you, me and Mario, we would go to Le Pan Quodin on a Sunday morning. And in walks a white woman with a carriage, and then there's this black woman who probably is from the islands, right? And this mother is like flipping her hair or looking at her phone, and this black woman is holding this baby, nursing this baby, tending to this baby. That's your baby. Why do you need this black woman to take care of your baby? And again, this was like 2018, 19. So the whole idea that the old black mammy does not exist is a fallacy. Just like people think that integration is a real thing. Here we go. I wanted to pair this. And I'm not sure if you guys knew of this woman who used a black woman as a seat. This is modern time, right? So the work that I do, I have so many different influences. Gordon Parks is one of my favorite photographers, only because he did it all and he did it well. Gordon Parks wasn't just a photographer, and he wasn't like just the first of many things. He was also a filmmaker, a screenwriter, a musician, a novelist. And again, he did it all and he did it well. And I was like, oh, I'm all those things. Okay, so let me look at Gordon Parks. Let me study him because I want to do it all and I want to do it well. But what I wanted to talk about today were more so the women that influence the work that I do. And 2 comes to mind, Carrie Mae Weems. And I'm thinking about the work that Carrie Mae Weems created based off of those daguerreotypes and those tintypes of the historical past. And I don't know if you've ever seen this particular series, but if you have not, it is important for you to, it behooves you to go look up From Where I Saw What Happened and I Cried. From Here I Saw What Happened and I Cried. And it's actually so powerful. And I think another thing that influenced me about Carrie Mae Weems is that she took her time with this particular series, 1995 to 1996. I feel like a lot of times we try to, I don't know how many artists are in the room, but we try to finish things up very quickly, like within a short time frame, a couple of months, because we have to get it out into the world because we want to be on to the next. But I think it's important, especially with subject matters that are saturated with something that is so heavy and so deep as what she did with this particular series, to take your time. Some things deserve time, and I'm saying that to all artists. Sometimes you have to slow it up. And even if it is over a stretch of time and you might be working on something else simultaneously, I think the idea of making sure the voice and the intent in which you want out there in the world is really heard. So again, Carrie Mae Weems. Another person who I admire so much is Dina Lawson. Her work definitely addresses it in a modern sense, right? The brutal racial legacy, but she addresses it using like the modern times and modern images. So this is another article that's actually in the New York Times. So if you really want to know about all of those women that we don't know the names of, all the men that we don't know the names of, we the sauce, just so y'all know. And we the sauce, because look at this image of these incredibly beautiful women. Now I found this image and I was like, these are the type of 10 types that I want to take, where they're centered. They look incredibly regal. They're beautiful. I'm thinking that it's probably 3 generations here, but it says a hand-colored 10-type portrait of 3 unidentified African-American women, 1856 Harvard Library. These women look incredible. They're centered. There's nobody white in the background or foreground. They are the central focus. So I started thinking about this work of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to serve up for my community. And my first 10 types are here. Tayshawn, and she was my model in New York. She is an actress, and she's really good. And she was like, I'll sit for you. Tayshawn, 2. Tayshawn, 3. So in light of all of this, and bringing us back to the work that that's going to be on an exhibition here, that's in the gallery, I started thinking about the fact that I love doing portraits. One thing I can't do as a filmmaker, as a writer, is because I'm a director, I can frame up a shot. I can do the 2D thing and make it look really beautiful. But I wanted to kind of challenge myself a little bit more by doing something that's more tangible. And again, I talked to Denise about this, and she was like, the work that you do in 2D is tangible, right? And I love that you said that. But I feel like after COVID, and I shouldn't say after COVID because it's still a thing, it's still happening clearly, but COVID changed all of us in incredible ways. I mean, so many people have lost loved ones. We lost time. I feel sorry, and I say this to my students when I first come in class. I'm like, listen, I am so sorry you do not have the ability to have the full college experience that I had. I'm sorry. I'm saying that I'm sorry to you all as well. It's different for you. So you've changed. The world has changed. The way education is approached is changed. How I was taught versus how you all are taught is completely different. And I think that with everything that's going on in the world, not just COVID, but racial brutality, police brutality, etc., we have lost connection with humanity and with people. I mean, I don't know if America has even reckoned with its racism. I know that for a fact. It has not said I'm sorry for racism, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in. It's not recognizing that like other countries have, and that's a larger part of the problem. But what I wanted to do, especially when I talked to Mario about our culture and the work that we do, there's some overlapping, but he said to me, Danielle, we are made of star and galaxy matter. And that just stuck with me because it was so poetic, but it's so real. And I wanted to kind of tap into that because for me, that's what my family is. And this is just kind of like a collage of what I did with my family. And I'm like, this is like a constellation, my own version of it, like a constellation. But you have my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents, my grandparents, my mom and my pops in here, and my uncles and everybody. My uncle down here looking super fly in this, ruffled shirt, etc. But just documenting history. And I think one of the main things that I can say about documenting history, what we've seen earlier with the images, is that with documenting Black history, they're unnamed people. You don't know who those women and those men were, those enslaved men and women. You don't know their names. You don't know who they loved. You don't know their family. You know nothing about them. And if one of us any Black person in this room, if we descended from them, we would not know. We would have no idea that that was our relative that was in that image. I don't know if one of my relatives were in one of those earlier images. There's a disconnect. But I'm going to tell you one thing you can do. You can always trace white history. I know friends that I can trace my uncle, my great-great-great-great uncle back to the 1500s, et cetera. My great-grandfather is so-and-so and such and such. I'm like, wow, you have such a privilege. We don't have that. opportunity. So it behooves us right now, and I feel like for me, I'm a Black archivist. Whether it's of Detroit, of my family, I'm going to always document. It's so much for me to uncover and unpack because our stories are beautiful and need to be told. We are people who have rose from impossible circumstances. So I stand on the shoulders of all of my ancestors that are here in this image. And I'm always thinking about portals, ancestral planes and spirituality, ancient connections to the divine, right? So again, like I said, for me, I'm always honoring my ancestors. This is something that I do every morning, right? So I'm always thinking about the planes and portals that we have no idea about. You know, when we think about outer space, I mean, when you really look at outer space images, even this one right here, this is from NASA, just to let you know, I didn't make this. This is a NASA image. I'm like, this looks like this looks like a portal. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to be Marvel Universe on you, but essentially this looks like something that we have yet to even know or tap into. We have no idea. And I think what's absurd is when we just feel like in this whole scheme of things that we are the only. It's like, I mean, it's so much happening here, right? I can go on and on. I don't want to go off on a tangent. I feel like the dean is here. He might be like, put me out of here because I might be talking about, you know, it's other planets and other galaxies going on here. But that's where that's what I believe. So I made these images of my sister because I love to tap in, like I said. For me, I am able to trace. I know my mom traced a great deal of my maternal side, so they documented a lot. My paternal side was a little bit easier to document because we are Creole. And Creole, we got French people, all of that, Louisiana, all of that. And the records in Louisiana are absolutely profound how they kept the records there, right? So being able to trace back to my fourth and fifth great-grandmother and knowing that she was one of the most powerful women that walked this planet. She, at 40, was freed from slavery. She had 13 children. She was able to purchase all of her children out of slavery except for one before she passed away. But she owned land. She harvested tobacco in Cane River, which was virtually impossible. They said because it's so swampy down there, they were like, how does she do it? They still don't know. She also did indigo. She killed bears and harvested the oil. So you'll see all of this like in this imagery. So with my sister, cowrie shells represents abundance, right? And now I put this, now that's not a bear, so don't call PETA on me. It was just a fake fur that I got from Amazon. But it just represents like the bear fur. You know, she sold these things. She was an entrepreneur. So just thinking about the idea that at 40, after being enslaved your entire life, you were able to come out and still be on top. Like, she owned land. And there's, if you go down to Cane River, there's a sign that says Coin Coin, which was her name. So I wanted to show the power of our bloodline and our lineage. I always tell my sister when she's discouraged, I'm like, listen, we got 10,000 ancestors walking behind us. And just think about one of them, Coin Coin. So it's nothing that you cannot do. It's nothing that you cannot do. So this is called Black Salt Descendant. It is my sister in different powerful positions. But of course, you probably also see Black Madonna here as well. Another quote that I thought was powerful when it comes to the spiritual sense. Again, we're talking about portals and entering different worlds. Like historians, religious scholars rendered religions of oral cultures invisible because elaborated written documents, sacred texts of sorts, became a crucial criterion for the importance of the retrospective tradition. Illiterate indigenous societies with elaborate forms of female leadership and egalitarian structures were thus perceived as especially primitive or low in their development. How absurd. The most stratified societies were along gender, class, family lineage, and ethnic lines, as for instance, ancient Egypt or Kemet, which for that reason, despite massive evidence to the contrary, was depicted as a white culture by Western archaeologists, which is all lies, of course. And the more such societies had a system of written documentation, the more likely they were to be classified as high cultures with respectable, noteworthy religious beliefs. And this is from the mysterious Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau, a study of the powerful women, female leadership in the 19th century New Orleans. Homer, right? Iliad, Troy. I love the Iliad, but that was all oral tradition until somebody wrote it down, right? So why, when there are stories, specifically Black culture of color, that are passed down by word of mouth, why are those considered illiterate or primitive or low? We need to question these things, or not taken into consideration. Or the whole idea that Kemet, which that's the original name of Egypt, was a white society. Okay. So if it's too heavy, put it down. So what I want to do is I want to actually show you all my film that I did last year. It's called Take Flight. And because we were talking about the spiritual portals and ancestral connections, this film depicts that. But it was a part of my husband's show. And, you know, I have to give it up for Mario. Thank you so much. I love you for being amazing and supportive. But his name is Mario Moore, and he's famous, y'all. So if y'all don't know who he is, he's an incredible artist. Like, seriously, it's not a joke. He is, right? But I did this film because he asked me to do a collaboration with him for his show. His show in Detroit was called Midnight in Canaan, and it focused specifically on Black culture in Detroit, and just Black agency, and how there were revolutionary people, the Underground Railroad specifically. You know, if you read history, if you read white historians, they will tell you that majority of the people who did the Underground Railroad were white people, right? It's not true. Okay, listen to me. I'll tell you the truth. Go read it. You know, it's funny because Mario always laughs at me, because if I'm looking for a book, I go on Amazon and I read the comments, right? And if it's a whole bunch of angry white people in the comments, I'm getting that book. Because that book is probably telling the truth. Let me tell you, it's the sauce. Every time I get a book where it's like all these like white, yeah, it's a lie, or whatever they're saying in the comments, it's a 1-star for them. I'm like, let me get this book because it's got the truth in here. So I'm saying all that to say, when you think about the Underground Railroad, right, and especially if you're focusing on Detroit, there was a large population of Black people, and they had this whole system. And not just a system, but it was so powerful that it was almost like this secret society. They had a secret handshake. They had a secret initiation that people had to go through in order to even be a part of the Underground Railroad in Michigan, because you're the last stop in Detroit before you get to Canada. So they took it very seriously. And I have to say, I love John Brown because he held it down. It was this one story that was told about John Brown, how he was with William Lambert. William Lambert was one of the revolutionary individuals here in Michigan and Detroit specifically, who was like one of the focal leaders of the Underground Railroad. And they were talking outside some type of barn. And a man came up and he looked suspicious. He looked suspicious, right? And John Brown took him and threw him in the river. The man would have drowned if John Brown didn't go in and get him. But John Brown took the movement even seriously, right? So it's just this, talk about ally, right? If y'all not matching up to John Brown, I ain't trying to hear it, okay? But I want to just go ahead and show you guys this film because, again, I tapped into Black agency and the Underground Railroad, and it's this one moment in this film that talks about a family of two, a husband and wife, the Blackburns. They were like the reason why we had the first insurrection in Michigan, in Detroit specifically. It was a riot that happened because they escaped from slavery, and somebody found out about them 2 years after they escaped. Long story short, they were imprisoned and they were going to be sent back to the people who owned them. And the city of Detroit showed up, and they showed out, right? It was a big thing. So one of the moments is that Lucy Blackburn was her name. She was enslaved, her husband, Thornton Blackburn. But she was in prison, and two of the women, the free women of Detroit, they went into the jail, and they were like, listen, we just want to go pray with her. And of course, they let her go in, and one of the women switched places with Lucy, and Lucy crossed over to Canada to her freedom, and the other one stayed in prison. But of course, she was a free woman; they couldn't hold her. But she eventually had to go and escape because of the work she did. But the bravery in that, the sacrifice in that, it's just powerful. So there's a moment in this film that depicts that. So let me go ahead and play this film and stop doing all this chit-chat so y'all can see this thing. All right, can we dim the lights completely for the screen? Thank you so much. So with that film, I was able to work with some incredible individuals. Cinematographer, his name is Jeremy Brockman. He's amazing. I wish he could be here tonight. Mario was one of the people who paired with us. I mean, there were EOs. And again, the people that you see dressed in the white, they're EOs, and that's from Lagos, right, in Africa. But they represent ancestors. So again, I'm always trying to make things tangible, right? With what I do with my work, it's just beyond just images on the screen. It's like, how can I make you feel something beyond what we've been experiencing? And I feel like with the EOs, that was something that I wanted to make a tangible thing for us as Black people. And again, I'm always tying us back to Africa. I'm trying to make those connections that are impossible for us to make via ancestry, because again, at the top of the presentation, you saw all these images of people that you would never know their names. And again, like I said, I don't know if those people are related to me, but they mattered to someone. And to me, they are my ancestors, and I claim them as my ancestors because nobody knows who they are, but they're my people. And I want to make sure I'm always highlighting them. So the work I do is never to try to replace those people, but it is always about just drawing attention to them. Let us not even focus on the white people that's in the foreground. Y'all get enough airtime. But let's really focus on the Black individuals who made America what it is, not because we wanted to, but by force. And then we're told that we're supposed to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, which is absurd, without any assistance with systemic racism that's in place. But what we really need to do is come together and recognize the whole history of what is. And I believe that America needs to reckon with itself for what it has done, not just to Black people, but indigenous people, and really have these tough conversations, right? They're hard to have, but if you're uncomfortable, you need to get comfortable. Because if you're not having these conversations about what's happening, what has happened, and I think what's really interesting is that to see so many white people who are just at the edge, but they like, well, I didn't put your people in slavery. That's not the conversation that you need to be having, right? You need to be like, how can I be an ally and change things today? How can I utilize my voice to support what is happening? There's a reason why there are men and women, specifically Black people, getting killed by the police. And again, y'all can be like, oh, with Tyree Nichols, yo, that was the Black police officers, woo! That wasn't no white people. But you have to realize that what's in place is a system that is controlled by white racism and white supremacy. That is the whole reason why the police structure is in place. And they felt that they can do it, but I'm going to tell you one thing that they're going to do is they're going to make an example of those Black men who did that, right? All of the other white cops who killed, they get off, they get paid leave absence. They immediately fired those men. And they're going to be in prison. So can we have that conversation at the very least? You understand what I'm saying? So again, anytime you see me, you're going to see Black work. You're going to see me highlighting my people. You're going to see me uplifting my people. And I think it's just listen to what it is that I have to say, or any other artists that are here, what they have to say with that voice, because it's something profound. And we're trying to fill in the gaps. Not replace, but fill in the gaps. But anyway, I want to say thank you all so much for coming out to this conversation. Should I open it up for questions, or how do we do questions? Oh, okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything? You mad at me, you can tell me. But like my grandma said, you mad, you can get glad, right? Okay, anybody have any questions? Yes, hi. Oh my gosh, look, you're going to have me, I can't comment. No comment. Okay, you talk about way back here at the beginning. Okay. Yes, thank you for your comment. I don't want to talk about these poor little children. I don't want to talk about these poor little children. All right, so anyone else? Yes, hi. Yeah. One of the things that I can say is that I'm heavy in pre-production, meaning like I do all of the planning. So specifically talking about a shoot, whether it's a shoot or a script, I am mapping out things in grave detail. And the reason why I do it, first of all, because I want to try to just get the best of the work that I'm doing. But if I'm talking about specifically like a shoot, I get on everybody's nerves when I'm doing a shoot. I'm emailing all kinds of hours and all kinds of things. But something, if you're a filmmaker in the room, something's going to go wrong on set. But how can you minimize like what goes wrong on set? So what I do is, for me, I'm mapping out all of the shots that I may want. I'm talking to the DP. We do location recce at least twice. Director of photography, who is the cinematographer. He or she operates the camera, and they make the magic happen. They bring the vision to life, really and truly. So I'm mapping out all of the details, like beforehand, what I may want, shot list. I'll have to say, producing isn't my favorite thing. When I was in New York, I had a producer, but now that I'm here, I am the producer. It's not my favorite song, but I'll do it. So I think a lot of what I do as a filmmaker is the producing side, but it also makes me a better filmmaker because I pay even closer attention to detail. So I don't know if that really answers your question because it's so broad. I mean, I think my approach to my work is very different. Whether I'm doing if I'm doing photography, it's different. If I'm doing tintype, it's different. So if I'm doing a shoot, whether it's for a series or if I have a client, like I'm setting the whole tone. I have music playing, we got the backdrops going, we got some incense and sage. I mean, I'm doing the whole works, right? But if I'm doing a client, usually I send out a questionnaire to my clients that I'm photographing. And it's really about them talking about themselves and saying, I ask them, like, what's your favorite photo? What's your least favorite photos and why? And I have them send those things to me. I ask them to send me a photo of themselves without any makeup. I ask them to send me their favorite colors and things like that, because what I always do is just try to find environments or backgrounds that make them feel comfortable, especially because I haven't spent a substantial amount of time with them. So it gives me the opportunity to set the tone for them feeling comfortable, and then I can be more personal and take really beautiful photos of them because they feel a little bit more at ease. So that's with photography. And the tintype, that's a process in and of itself. So you go through this whole ritual of silver nitrate and collodin, et cetera. But there's so much I can say. It's so broad, but I really want to be able to answer your question effectively. Did I do that for you? Okay. Yeah, you're very welcome. Anyone else? Oh my God, Jeremy is here. Hey, Jeremy. Jeremy is the cinematographer for Take Flight, right? The beautiful film that you saw. He shot all the images. He's an incredible cinematographer, friend, writer. He's coming into his own writing voice. But just a beautiful spirit and a very talented person. But also, he won an Emmy. I'm always going to pump that. He won an Emmy, y'all, for real. So, yes. Yes, always.
We have a question here.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask if there are any other processes that you've worked with, like as far as photography goes, like Van Dyke, Cyanotype, anything like that?
No, thank you so much for that question. I'm thinking about Cyanotype a lot now because my passion for tintype, and I'm always thinking about where can I practice this, right? So we're building out a dark room in our basement for me to do my thing, where I don't have to be beholden to any other places. When I moved back from New York, that was one thing that I found hard, is finding a space where I can actually do my full practice. It's easy to do digital, right? But digital is like my third or fifth or 10th favorite thing to do. But I'm talking about developing my own stuff, and that's what I really love. So finding a studio in Detroit that has a sink, I could not find one. So my best friend, he was like, yo, we're going to build a dark room in the basement. I'm like, yes. So temporarily I'm using CCS to do that work, and they're very gracious in allowing me to do that. But yes, I definitely want to tap in. So I'm open to learning so much more. Thank you so much for that question. Hi. Yes. Thank you so much. I did take a class there. Oh, thank you so much. Eleanor is incredible. Eleanor Oaks, that's probably who you're referring to. Yeah, she's wonderful. I want to do some work there. I did take a course there, but I know they were in the transition and they kind of downsized. They did move locations, and it's much smaller, so you have to really kind of book it and get in where you fit in. But thank you so much for that. Oh, okay, hey, CCS alum. I'm teaching at CCS, so clearly, yes. Hey, yes.
What media have you worked on? I know you mentioned Sesame Street. Are there any other things you've worked on?
Yeah, so when I was in New York, I worked on production in Orange is the New Black, The Good Wife. I worked for the Rachel Ray Show. So yeah, all of those wonderful syndicated shows which have like so many moving parts to it. I don't even want to get into Hollywood. God bless Hollywood, right? Hollywood needs some love. But I still love being a filmmaker. I still love what I do. And if Disney calls me, I'm going to answer. You feel me? Okay, all right. Who else? Anyone else? Yes, hi.
Hi, yes. So what inspired you to be a filmmaker? And if I may ask another question, what is your end goal?
Thank you so much for that. It's interesting because I will always point to Spike Lee, She's Gotta Have It, right? But after being asked that question so many times, I'm like, how can I give a different answer? Should I stand on my head? Like what? But I really thought about it, and what's interesting is that my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, he was a photographer and a filmmaker, but he worked at Ford. But all of the home videos, all of the images that document the family, he took them. So I feel like it was just kind of like a forced marriage. It was just in me to do it, whether I wanted to do it or not. But I feel like from a very young age, I loved film. I mean, I truly loved film to the point where my mom recognized that in me. And my sister was a dancer. I was the film person. And don't tell nobody, y'all, so don't call the police on my mom. But we would go to one movie. She would pay for one. She was a single parent. And then we'll sneak into like 2 other movies. And we'll make a whole day of it, right? She's the bomb, right? So she fed that for me. And even though she didn't have the money to get me a camera, you know, so many times I see these documentaries, Steven Spielberg, who I admire tremendously, but, you know, his parents had money. They bought him a camera when he was, I don't know, 9 or whatever. I didn't have that luxury, so I had to make a way. So my mom did the very best that she could. So by the time I was able to pick up a camera, of course, you know, in my mind, I'm like, it's late. It's so late. I wish I had the opportunity to get it earlier. But it was the right time because it fostered the passion in me. So then by the time I did get my hands on a camera, I didn't take advantage of all of the blessings that I received. I was very thankful and grateful once I was able to access those things. So, yeah, I'll have to say, and of course I'm going to say Spike Lee because he is incredible, and I was taught by him at NYU. He's very tough on you, but he's amazing. So, yes, that's my answer. Is that good enough for you? Yeah. Okay. All right, I want to make sure. How you doing? Hey. Hey, husband. Yes, you can. Well, the desire for the images to be taken were more so about the white families, documenting their history. The black people were just kind of used as seats or, you know, props to hold up the babies, or they weren't supposed to really be there. I'm sure if they could erase them, they probably would, because again, nobody names these people. Like if we go to a specific image where you have the father, or should I say the grandfather, and it must be back, but it's the grandfather and the grandson named, and then that woman, it's a woman who's got the attitude, who I love so much. You got those people named, but she's not named, right? So I think it was an intentional thing. I mean, when we think about black people anyway in America, we were commodity. I mean, they took out insurance policies on us just in case we die so they can make money off of us. I mean, it's really absurd, but that's the way it was. So I don't think there was any value. As beautiful as this woman is, she's just called her nurse, right? We got Georgina Holmes, right? We got her name, but we just got her nurse, right? There was no value in the image placed on making sure she was documented or people knowing who she was. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly, but okay, all right. Anyone else? Yes, hi. Favorite piece I ever worked on? That's really hard. You know, because all the work that I do, whether it's a screenplay or film or whatever, I want to do it. I love it. So maybe what I should say, okay, how about a screenplay that I wrote? It's a feature. It's called Measure of Vengeance. I think that's probably one of my favorite pieces that I've written. I think does that sound so pretentious? Like, one of my favorite pieces that I've written. No, I don't want to sound pretentious. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorites. Anyone else? Oh, we got some hands. Okay, I see you, and then you. Okay. And I see you.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes. I would want to take the photos of them. You know what I mean? Like, I would want to center them. I think, I don't know. I would hope that, I don't know what I would want them to say, but I would want them to feel seen and to know that I see them before I see this beautiful white child sleeping. Like, I see this woman and that she matters and that who she loved mattered. And, you know, whether she had to walk 10 miles to go see her own child because she was separated from that child. And these are true stories. Like, people had to walk and get passes and permission and had to walk 10 miles one way to go see their child, and they had to be back by nightfall. These kind of things are real, and they happen to my people. So I just want her to know that I see her. And I'm getting emotional because I don't know if she ever felt seen, and she lived a life of oppression, you know? So I hope that answers your question. Yes? Hi.
Not so much a question, more of a, if you want to answer what I'm asking.
Okay.
Speak to your confidence and your just energy. I'm loving it, and you have so much strength in yourself and your work, and I think it's a valuable thing for people to talk about with other young artists in the room.
Yes, thank you so much. You're not born with that, right? For any other artist in the room, it's something that you kind of have to gain as time goes on. I think as an artist, I think one thing that Erykah Badu said on stage, she said, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit, right? Like, that's just what we're gonna be. But I think the best thing for us to be as artists is to be open to taking constructive criticism and knowing when to take the note, right? Going to institutions like University of Michigan and NYU, predominantly white institutions, and doing incredibly black work, and having professors that are predominantly white not understand the work and not even want to understand the work, and having to find people who will understand the work and give you the right kinds of notes, right? So going back to the piece that I told you about Measure of Vengeance, I was in my screenwriting class and I was the only black student in there. And they read the opening scene, and the opening scene had a lynching happening. And the professor and everybody was like, you need to cut this scene. And I'm like, is it not working cinematically, or is it making you uncomfortable? There's a difference, right? And then I had a classmate next to me. She was much older, but she went on to say how she had a black nanny that she loved so much, and she was offended by the scene, right? So these are the conversations that you have in these spaces. So of course, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm gonna focus on the black students a lot because I know the struggle of what they probably experience in institutions. And I'm not saying that I'm not talking to white students as well, But it's Black History Month. I told y'all I'm going to black it up in here, right? So it's just the whole, yes, it's just the whole struggle of just finding your voice and being able to find what it is that you want to say. When I teach my students, I usually take them to go see work at the DIA or wherever, and I'm like, let's look at this work, digest the work. And when we come back to the classroom, I'm like, what was your favorite piece in this exhibition or whatever? And they all name their piece and they say why. And I'm like, when you're thinking about work, it's always almost like a call and response, like a church thing. I descend from pastors, right? So all of that energy is in me too. But how can you respond to that work? Not emulate the work that you've seen, but respond to it if it moves you in such a way. Because we're always, there's nothing new under the sun, but we're always standing on somebody else's shoulders. And, you know, the work that I create and through my lens, whether I'm writing a story about Emmett Till, if it was, I mean, and again, that's done 1,000 times, I wouldn't want to do it, but if I depicted it through my lens, it would be different than what is on television now. What's a different angle that I can do? How do I see it differently? How do I see it more fierce or more soft or whatever that is? So I think it's just about learning your voice and taking your time and being patient with yourself. But also, if you have a talent, always hone your craft. I'm always reading, I'm always studying, I'm always learning from the last project and looking at those mistakes, but not trying to be harsh on myself. But what I'm always doing is learning and evolving. And also, I think the most important thing I can say to artists is trust yourself. Trust the voice that you have. And take notes from people, but make sure you evaluate what those notes are. Make sure it's relevant to your practice. I think one of the best things that you can do is take the notes, because it can make the work better. Unless you're getting a note like how my note was, which was, why do you have a lynching scene in a lynching film? Go ahead. Hi. Daughters of the Dust. Absolutely. Julie Dash, that film resonates with me on so many different levels. Eve's Bayou by Casey Lemons resonates with me on so many different levels. I feel like I pull from these women, right? Again, and specifically Julie Dash's piece, Daughters of the Dust. I feel like Take Flight. I'm always thinking about, like, how can, like, if you did like a showcase of these films, I would love for Take Flight to be featured with that, because it's in conversation. Lemonade is in conversation. Mm-hmm. Oh, Childish Gambino. Okay. Yeah. Like, just, I think whenever somebody's tapping in on an ancestral plane, when we go into Africa and we're taking people there, and we're talking about African spirituality, not religion, right? And not westernized religion, because I feel like Christianity can be very oppressive to people of color here if it's told in a specific vein. But if you're going back to Africa and you're talking about EO, and, you know, you're going into the river, you're walking into the waters, and again, the water, especially for an African spirituality, it's a conduit. It's a connection to the ancestral world. Talking about portals, right? As we talked about a little earlier. So, yeah. Yes, hi. Yes, girl. Girl, listen. I would love for Marvel Cinematic Universe to hire me to do Storm's whole story. Oh, I love y'all. This is the energy I'm talking about. because I love Storm, and I just I identified with her growing up because she was a dark woman. I mean, she had white hair, but when Halle Berry played her, I was like, oh, okay. But I'm just like, I'm like, oh, she cute. But, in the comic books, Storm was dark-skinned. And I was like, yo, she's incredible. But, like, if we really, like, fleshed out her story, she was married to Black Panther. And you know what I mean? She got a lot more, she's saying a lot more. Listen, tell me about it. Listen, go call Marvel Universe and tell them. Yes. No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I think the more we speak these things, the more these things can come to fruition. I appreciate that question. Is there anyone? Yes. Hi.
After everything said and done, what is your angle?
Oh, yeah, you did ask what's my angle. My whole sole purpose, and this is what I always say, is to highlight stories about women, female protagonists, Black culture, and the Black diaspora. You would never see me do a film about a white man. Sorry. But not sorry. Anyone else? I know we're probably running out of time, but if there's any, I'm very ask me anything. I'll talk to you about anything. Please don't be afraid. Hi. That's so hard, right? Because all of them matter. Like I said earlier, I don't know what I would say. I would be trying to go back in time physically to get her away from slavery. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, and that's me talking modern day. It's no way for me to even begin to get an entry point into that. As much as I want to, and I really would love to answer your question in some type of academic, philosophical way, but I have nothing. Right? But wanting them not to be enslaved, wanting them to be able to live free would be what I would want. Oh, thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. If you have more questions, please bring them down to the Baby Room Gallery, and you can ask Danielle in person. Please join us down the hall in the Baby Room. Thank you so much, everyone.